Let me take you back to 1944. Just picture it. The setting is a bleak, heavily guarded concentration camp. Amidst all that unimaginable horror, a young prisoner, pushed completely to the brink by sheer emotional trauma, reaches out and bends a massive metal gate using absolutely nothing but his mind. Now, you have to realize, this isn't just a flashy display of power. It's the visceral, violent birth of a completely new species, born right out of sheer human cruelty. This single terrifying moment literally changes human history forever. But meanwhile, across the world in a quiet corner of upstate New York, a young boy with immense telepathic powers befriends a little girl who can shapeshift out of her blue, scaly form at will. These are the quiet, volatile beginnings of the greatest evolutionary leap humanity has ever seen. So grab a seat and let's dive into this incredibly tangled, deeply fascinating history of mutant kind. I'm going to break down every critical moment of this complete mutant timeline so we can understand exactly why all of this matters so much. To truly understand our story, we actually have to step all the way back to the 1800s, 1845 to be exact. This is where we meet James Howlett. Now, you probably know him better as Wolverine. His century-spanning life connects almost every single era we're going to explore together. He is, without a doubt, the absolute emotional anchor of this entire timeline. In 1845, after a groundskeeper brutally kills his father, young James experiences this immense, overwhelming stress that triggers his mutation for the very first time. Bone claws violently erupt right from his knuckles, and a powerful healing factor suddenly awakens. In a blind rage, he kills the groundskeeper, who, in a deeply tragic twist, reveals himself to be James's actual birth father. It's devastating. James runs off into the cold night with his half-brother, Victor Creed. And because of their unique healing abilities, these two basically become ageless beings. They are walking ghosts in a mortal world. For well over a century, James and Victor fight side by side. I mean, just imagine living through the absolute bloodiest conflicts in human history over and over again, completely unable to die. They fight through the American Civil War, the muddy, miserable trenches of both world wars, and eventually they find themselves deep in the suffocating jungles during the Vietnam War in the 1970s. While James becomes hollowed out by all this endless violence, just desperately searching for some kind of peace, Victor goes the opposite route. He begins to revel in it. This divergence in their morality is absolutely crucial to understand. When Victor's violent impulses grow too dark, he ends up killing a senior officer who was trying to stop him from assaulting a woman in a village. Because of this, the two brothers are finally arrested and sentenced to death by the military. Now, what's really fascinating here is how their mutation makes them virtually invincible to any conventional punishment. They literally survive a firing squad for 100 hours. When they're asked how it felt, their response is just this dark, dismissive joke. It tickled. And you know what? That catches the attention of Major William Stryker. He recruits them for an elite, morally bankrupt strike team made up entirely of mutants. But Logan quickly grows sick of the bloodshed and leaves to try and carve out a quiet life in Canada. Stryker, though, he doesn't let go so easily. Years later, Stryker needs a weapon capable of surviving a brutal experimental process. So he uses Victor to seemingly murder Logan's new love, offering Logan a chance for revenge by fusing his raw bone skeleton with an indestructible metal called adamantium. We really need to look at this as the ultimate human exploitation of mutants. Logan survives the agonizing process, but the second he learns Stryker just wants to use him as a mindless weapon, he breaks out. Unfortunately, Stryker shoots him right in the skull with an adamantium bullet, which wipes Logan's memory totally clean and leaves him wandering the wilderness for decades. Okay, let's jump forward a bit to 1962 and see how this builds into a much larger world. Remember that telepathic boy and the metal-bending prisoner from 1944? Well, they've grown up into Charles Xavier and Magneto. They cross paths and quickly discover that the CIA is actively tracking mutants. During this time, they meet a young super genius named Hank McCoy. Hank invents a staggering piece of technology called Cerebro. Basically, Cerebro is a powerful machine utilized by a telepath to track down any person on Earth by amplifying their brain waves. Working together, these early mutants use this tech to stop a rogue villain from sparking a literal nuclear war. But in the aftermath of saving the world, a deep, irreparable philosophical fracture occurs between them. What we're witnessing here isn't just a fun superhero team-up, it's the ideological groundwork for the next 50 years. Xavier wants peaceful assimilation with humans. Magneto, having survived the Holocaust, knows deep in his bones that human fear always leads to eradication. So the team splits, drawing the battle lines for a philosophical war that will rage for decades. So the world is slowly waking up to the existence of these superpowered beings, and human fear begins to take a very tangible shape through a man named Bolivar Trask.
Trask genuinely believes mutants will eventually destroy mankind, so he forms Trask Industries to build an army of towering mutant-hunting robots called Sentinels. To study the mutant gene and figure out how to beat them, Trask brutally experiments on mutants, including some of Mystique's closest friends. Fueled by pure vengeance, the shape-shifting Mystique tracks Trask down to the Paris Peace Conference in 1973 and assassinates him right in front of the world's leaders. But I want you to notice the horrific, tragic irony we are seeing right here. Mystique assassinates Trask to save mutants, right? But by leaving her own shape-shifting DNA behind at the crime scene, she literally hands humanity the biological key to making the Sentinels completely unstoppable. She inadvertently locks humanity and mutant kind into a path of mutual destruction. All right, that brings us right into the original trilogy era, looking at everything from the pivotal showdown at Liberty Island to the dark, devastating disasters at Alkali Lake. Let's break down exactly what happens in this era because it's a lot. Fast forward to the early 2000s. Xavier's school is thriving as a safe haven, but a looming strict mutant registration act pushes Magneto over the edge. He attempts to forcefully mutate the world's human leaders at Liberty Island, using a young runaway named Rogue to power his machine. An amnesiac Wolverine, who has just found the X-Men, manages to stop him. But this victory, it's incredibly short-lived. A sudden mutant attack on the president sparks mass global panic, giving Major William Stryker, yeah, the exact same guy who experimented on Wolverine, the political leverage to raid Xavier's school. Stryker captures Xavier and drags him to a secret underground base at Alkali Lake. His plan is absolutely chilling. Stryker forces Xavier into a twisted, makeshift dark version of Cerebro. The psychological horror here is wild. Xavier is being used as a weapon of mass genocide against his own children. It's easily one of the darkest concepts in this timeline. The X-Men team up with Magneto to stop Stryker, but Magneto flips the script at the very last second, attempting to use the machine to kill all humans instead. Thankfully, both extremists are stopped just in time. But listen, escaping Alkali Lake comes at a devastating cost. The massive dam holding back the lake completely bursts. Jean Grey steps outside, using every ounce of her telekinesis to hold back the crushing floodwaters, sacrificing herself so the rest of the team can escape. It's a beautiful, heartbreaking moment. Months later, however, she miraculously returns, but something is horribly, horribly wrong. The immense trauma of dying awakened a deeply repressed alter ego inside her mind, a cosmic-level entity known as the Phoenix. This dark force completely overtakes her. What resides inside Jean Grey is pure, unchecked destruction. It leads her to murder her fiancé, Cyclops, and eventually she even obliterates Charles Xavier himself. We have to really understand the sheer emotional torture Logan is put through here. Because of his healing factor, the only man capable of surviving her cosmic disintegration is the man who desperately loves her. He is forced to literally gut her to save the world, leaving a permanent, jagged scar on his psyche. Right as all of this emotional chaos is happening, a massive pharmaceutical company weaponizes a so-called cure for the mutant gene. The brilliance of this specific storyline is that it forces a fundamental question. Is being a mutant a disease that needs fixing, or is it an identity? Magneto, predictably, sees this as the literal weaponization of mutant extinction and rallies a massive, violent army to destroy the facility producing it. During a rescue op, Mystique actually takes a cure dart that was meant for Magneto, sacrificing her powers to save him. And how does Magneto react? He abandons her at the very second she loses her powers. It's a brilliant moment that strips away his noble facade and reveals the cold, radical depths of his extremism. An apocalyptic battle ensues, which ends with Magneto being injected and seemingly stripped of his powers. With Jean dead and the X-Men utterly fractured, a deeply grief-stricken Wolverine flees into the remote Canadian wilderness. Now, what's really interesting about this next encounter is how it completely shatters what we thought we knew. Fast forward a bit. Decades later, Wolverine is just moving through an airport when he is suddenly approached by Magneto, who has very clearly regained his magnetic powers. But even more shocking, and I remember how crazy this was, Charles Xavier rolls right through the crowd, totally alive and well. When a stunned Wolverine asks how this is even possible, Xavier simply smiles and reminds him that he isn't the only one with unique gifts. The fact that Xavier and Magneto, two men who have been locked in a blood feud for half a century, are working together, it proves that whatever impending world-ending threat is coming is significantly worse than anything they've ever faced before. And this brilliantly illustrates the temporal fracture of our story. Look at this timeline. By the year 2023, the Sentinel dystopia has begun, and the world is an absolute nightmare. Trask's original Sentinel program has evolved into an unstoppable, shape-shifting force that has decimated both mutants and humans alike. The few surviving X-Men are totally backed into a corner, so they devise a desperate, impossible plan. They aren't just physically throwing Wolverine in a time machine, they are using Kitty Pryde's powers to project his 2023 consciousness directly into his younger 1973 body. Why him? Because his healing mind is literally the only one durable enough to survive a 50-year temporal jump without tearing itself apart. His mission is insane, but simple. Go to 1973 and completely reset the timeline by stopping the exact moment this war became inevitable. So, Wolverine wakes up in 1973, finding himself at the ultimate divergence point in history. He locates a completely broken, alcoholic Charles Xavier, whose powers and spirit are just shattered. Miraculously, Logan acts as the mentor this time and convinces Charles to help him stop Mystique from assassinating Bolivar Trask. It's a messy mission, but ultimately, instead of killing Trask, Mystique makes a choice. She ends up saving President Nixon on live television from a rogue, violent Magneto. The whole world sees a mutant acting as a savior, a hero, which completely neutralizes the public fear that was fueling the Sentinel program. Because of that single choice, the dystopian future of 2023 is instantly erased from existence. Just think about the sheer, staggering weight of this for a second. Decades of suffering, an entire trilogy's worth of history, and lifetimes of memories were just wiped away in a blink.
Which means, because we fundamentally altered the past, we have officially entered a completely new reality. The new timeline era, a period completely dominated by ancient gods and massive cosmic forces. You see, playing with time always has consequences. In 1983, the world's absolute first mutant awakens. We're talking about an ancient, godlike being known as Apocalypse, who seeks total human enslavement until a young new generation of X-Men destroys him. But here is the crucial, fascinating point. While the timeline changed, some destinies violently echo no matter what. Notice how time tries to correct itself. In the original timeline, Jean's psychological trauma unleashed the Phoenix. In this new timeline, during a 1992 space rescue mission, she is struck by a massive cosmic anomaly. The Phoenix Force, this cosmic entity of unimaginable power, possesses her, amplifying her abilities to devastating, uncontrollable levels. The timeline changed, sure, but Jean's tragic destiny as the Phoenix vessel remains an unavoidable absolute point in the universe. The sheer cosmic energy shatters her mental blocks, making her newly amplified abilities brutally terrifying. Consumed by this overwhelming cosmic rage, Jean accidentally kills Mystique, which immediately fractures the new team once again. Lost and vulnerable, she is manipulated by the Debari, a faction of shape-shifting alien refugees who are just desperately seeking to siphon her cosmic power for themselves. This all culminates in a massive, destructive battle. Jean finally realizes she cannot be contained on Earth. She flies up into the atmosphere and essentially sacrifices herself, exploding in a massive burst of blinding Phoenix energy, wiping out the alien threat. Her ambiguous disappearance leaves the X-Men totally broken. It just goes to prove that whether we're talking about 2006 or 1992, the uncontrollable power of the Phoenix Force leaves absolutely nothing but fractured families and tragedy in its wake. Now, moving away from the heavy cosmic drama of the main team, we really need to take a look at the chaotic side of things. Let's talk about the outliers, the mercenaries and hidden mutants operating completely in the margins of this new timeline. While the main X-Men are off dealing with cosmic threats, much darker things are happening in the shadows of this new timeline. We have chaotic outliers like the disfigured mercenary Deadpool, whose time-traveling fourth wall-breaking antics show just how wonderfully weird and wild the mutant world can be. But on a much more sinister note, we discover highly classified facilities like Millbury Hospital. Between 2024 and 2027, traumatized teenage mutants awaken here, genuinely believing they are receiving psychiatric help. But in reality, the sinister Essex Corporation is attempting to break their minds completely and train them as ruthless, obedient assassins. What we are looking at here is essentially a psychological horror story tucked right inside a superhero timeline. It shows us exactly how deeply corrupt human corporations have become in their obsession to weaponize the mutant gene. Eventually, the teens realize the truth and fight for their survival, violently overthrowing the hospital by harnessing a terrifying psychic manifestation known as the Demon Bear. But despite all these incredible divergent paths, the altered futures, the cosmic battles, and the hidden hospitals, everything eventually converges on one incredibly bleak reality. We have reached the end of the road. Welcome to the year 2029. The world is quiet. It's exhausted. The mutant gene is completely failing. In fact, no new mutants have been born anywhere on Earth in years. And that number you see right there, 1, that is the exact number of original X-Men left alive. Logan. Let's fully grasp the tragedy of this situation. The world's most powerful brain, Charles Xavier, the man who built a safe haven for his people, the eternal optimist, develops a severe degenerative brain disease. In a single uncontrollable psychic seizure a year prior, he accidentally paralyzes hundreds and wipes out the very students he swore to protect. It is an unbelievably cruel, twisted fate. Now, Xavier is deeply senile and heavily medicated, hidden away in a rusted, overturned water tower down in Mexico by a dying Wolverine, whose own legendary healing factor is finally failing him due to decades of adamantium poisoning. In this grim, dusty existence, Xavier clings to a tragic, heartbreaking dream. He tells Logan, "We're gonna get ourselves a boat, and I'm gonna go live on the ocean." He just wants to be somewhere out on the water where his failing, dangerous brain can't hurt anyone ever again. They are living like broken outlaws at the very end of the frontier. But their quiet, medicated misery is suddenly shattered by the arrival of a little girl named Laura. She possesses incredible agility, furious rage, and, shockingly, adamantium claws. She is a hunted clone, created in a cold corporate lab directly from Wolverine's own stolen DNA. The arrival of Laura, a literal, breathing piece of Logan's legacy, forces a dying man who wants absolutely nothing but peace to become a violent monster one last time. The corporation hunting Laura unleashes their absolute ultimate weapon, X-24, a prime condition, soulless clone of Wolverine himself. X-24 isn't just a physical threat. He represents Logan's absolute ultimate nightmare. He is the mindless, savage-based Logan always feared he truly was inside. In a moment of sheer, devastating cruelty, this silent clone violently murders Charles Xavier. Watching this hollow reflection murder the man who was a father to him is, without a doubt, the absolute emotional rock bottom of the entire timeline. A heavily aging, physically broken Logan is forced to push his failing healing factor to the absolute brink, fighting a mirrored image of his own violent past just to escape with Laura. Miraculously, Logan and Laura managed to reach the Canadian border, a designated safe haven where other escaped mutant children are hiding from the corporation. But the corporate soldiers corner them in the forest. Logan knows his body is completely giving out. He knows taking a green combat serum will burn out whatever tiny sliver of life he has left. But you know what? He takes it anyway. He injects himself, temporarily transforming his failing body into a berserker weapon so this new generation can simply have a chance to live. In a brutal, incredibly bloody final stand in the woods, Logan fights with a ferocity he hasn't shown in decades. He brutally defeats the corporate soldiers and finally manages to impale his own monstrous clone, securing safe passage across the border for Laura and the kids. So let's look at how this all concludes. Step 1, Logan succeeds in saving her, but he sacrifices himself in the battle. His healing factor totally gives out and he finally succumbs to his catastrophic wounds, holding his daughter's hand as he dies, finally experiencing the feeling of family. Step 2, Laura buries him in the quiet, peaceful woods. And step 3, before she walks away to cross the border, she picks up the simple wooden cross serving as his grave marker, and she tilts it on its side to form an X. When Laura tilts that cross, she isn't just burying her father. She is burying the last true X-Man, effectively closing the book on over 150 years of immense suffering, profound heroism, and an agonizing, bloody fight for survival. As we look back at all the erased futures, the endless ideological wars, and this incredibly poignant final sacrifice, we've mapped out fractured realities and completely broken minds. But the ultimate takeaway from this massive journey is this: evolution always finds a way to survive. Wolverine's long, painful legacy ensured that the spark of existence was passed on to the next generation. As these children cross the border into the great unknown, I leave you to wonder, what incredible, chaotic timeline will emerge from these ashes next? Is this truly the end of mutant kind, or merely the violent, necessary birth of something entirely new?